Well, just continuing my thoughts on reading from some of the great books that I've read. Surely one of the best books that was ever written was Catch-22. Now, the thing about Catch-22 is that people constantly use the phrase, "Oh, it's Catch-22," and what they mean when they say it's Catch-22 is that, well, you just can't get out of it. It's Catch-22, and so they use it without really knowing what its origin was. Well, make it so that you understand why it was called this. And the book was written by a man called Joseph Heller, and he was born in Brooklyn, New York. Now, in 1961, he published Catch-22. It had a very shaky start. It was refused. Went through all kind of rewrite. He had a team of people that just believed that it was this incredible book, which it is. And it's full of ways of putting things which are extremely special in the way that they're done. It's a very jaded book, of course, and I thought that I would read that part of the book which deals with explaining. Doc Danica is the war doctor who describes how Catch-22 works, which you might find interesting. So, set in Italy during World War II, this is the story of the incomparable malingering bombardier. In case you don't know what that word means, malingering, it means always trying to get off their duties. But the man is Yossarian, a hero who is furious because thousands of people he has never met are trying to kill him. But his real problem is not the enemy, it is his own army, which keeps increasing the number of missions the men must fly to complete their service. So this is like the Air Force, really, and they're running bombing missions, and they've got to run so many bombing missions before they're then sent home, because it's an extremely dangerous thing. So they're taken off that duty. And it says the number of missions the men must fly to complete their service. Well, yet if Yossarian makes any attempt to excuse himself from the perilous missions he's assigned, he'll be in violation of Catch-22, a hilariously sinister bureaucratic rule. A man is considered insane if he willingly continues to fly dangerous combat missions. But if he makes a formal request to be removed from duty, he is proven sane and therefore ineligible to be relieved. So you get that. If he doesn't say anything, then he's crazy. And he'll have to continue to fly these dangerous bombing missions. But if he complains and says, "I don't want to do this anymore, this is crazy," he's regarded as being sane. So, since its publication in 1961, no novel has matched Catch-22's intensity and brilliance in depicting the brutal insanity of war. So, let's get to the part where Doc Danica, who is the most jaded, disillusioned, cynical man that you could ever hope to meet. So, Doc Danica lived in a splotched grey tent with Chief White Halford. This is an Indian, an American, a Native American, whom he feared and despised. "I can just picture his liver," Doc Danica grumbled. "Picture my liver," Yossarian advised him. "There's nothing wrong with your liver." "Well, that shows how much you don't know," Yossarian Bluff and told Dr. Niker about the troublesome pain in his liver that had troubled him and had troubled Nurse Duckett and Nurse Kramer and all the doctors in the hospital because it wouldn't become jaundice and so it wouldn't go away. Dr. Niker wasn't interested. You think you've got troubles? He wanted to know. What about me? You should have been in my office the day those newlyweds walked in. Well, I won't go into that one. But anyway, said, so was Dr. Niker's office. He had decorated his waiting room with goldfish and one of the finest suites of cheap furniture. Whatever he could, he bought on credit, even the goldfish. For the rest, he obtained money from greedy relatives in exchange for shares of the profits. His office was in Staten Island, in a two-family fire trap just a few blocks away from the ferry stop, and only 1 block south of a supermarket, 3 beauty parlours and 2 corrupt druggists. It was a corner location, but nothing helped. Population turnover was small, and people clung through habit to the same position they had been doing business with for 4 years. Bills piled up rapidly, and he was soon faced with the loss of his most precious medical instrument, his adding machine, and then his typewriter. The goldfish died. Fortunately, just when things were blackest, the war broke out. It was a godsend, Dr. Niker confessed solemnly. Most of the other doctors were soon in the service and things picked up overnight. The corner location really started paying off, and I soon found myself handling more patients than I could handle competently. I upped my kickback fee with those 2 drugstores. The beauty parlours were good for 2-3 abortions a week. Told you, very jaded. Things couldn't have been better, and then look what happened. They had to send a guy from the draft board around to look me over. I was 4F. I had examined myself pretty thoroughly and discovered that I was unfit for military service. You'd think my word would be good enough, but it wasn't. Since I was a doctor in good standing with my county medical society and with my local Better Business Bureau, but no, it wasn't, and they sent this guy around just to make sure I really did have 1 leg amputated at the hip and was helplessly bedridden with incurable rheumatoid arthritis. Yossarian, we live in an age of distrust and deteriorating spiritual values. It's a terrible thing, Dr. Niker protested in a voice quavering with strong emotion. It's a terrible thing when even the word of a licensed physician is suspected by the country he loves. So all the time you have these kind of contradictions. He states one thing, like he stated there, you'd think it was enough that I'm a doctor and in good standing with the county and with the Better Business Bureau, but they sent a man around to just confirm that he had a leg amputated at the hip, so he'd lied it through his teeth. He'd work out very well at the moment in the government in America. But anyway, Dr. Niker had been drafted and shipped to Pianosa as a flight surgeon, even though he was terrified of flying. So, that's the part there. So let's see if I can find the part. So here's how Catch-22 comes about. So, Yossarian decided to, right there and then, to go crazy, because if he was crazy, he couldn't fly. He would have to be discharged. But that's where Catch-22 came in, and he told Dr. Niker, You're wasting your time, Dr. Danica was forced to tell him. Can't you ground someone who's crazy? Oh, sure, I have to. That's a rule saying I have to ground anyone who's crazy. So Yossarian says, why don't you ground me? I'm crazy. Ask Clevenger, my friend. Clevenger? Where is Clevenger? You find Clevenger and I'll ask him. Then ask any of the others. They'll tell you how crazy I am. Oh, they're crazy. Then why don't you ground them? Why don't they ask me to ground them? Because they're crazy, that's why. Of course they're crazy, Dr. Danica replied. I just told you they're crazy, didn't I? And you can't let crazy people decide whether you're crazy or not, can you? Yossarian looked at him soberly and tried another approach. Is Orr crazy? It sure is, Dr. Danica said. Can you ground him? Sure I can, but first he has to ask me to. That's part of the rule. Then why doesn't he ask you to ground him? Because he's crazy, Dr. Danica said. He has to be crazy to keep flying combat missions after all the close calls he's had. Sure, I can ground Orr, but first he has to ask me to. That's all he has to do to be grounded? That's all. Let him ask me. And then you can ground him? Yossarian asked. No, then I can't ground him. You mean there's a catch? Sure there's a catch, Danica replied. Catch 22. Anybody who wants to get out of combat duty isn't really crazy. There was only one catch, and that was catch 22, which specified that a concern for one's own safety in the face of dangers that were real and immediate was the process of a rational mind. Orr was crazy and could be grounded. All he had to do was ask, and as soon as he did, he would no longer be crazy and would have to fly more missions. Orr would be crazy to fly more missions and sane if he didn't. But if he was sane, he had to fly them. If he flew them, he was crazy and didn't have to. But if he didn't want to, he was sane and had to. Yossarian was moved very deeply by the absolute simplicity of this clause of catch 22 and let out a respectful whistle. That's some catch, that catch 22, he observed. It's the best there is, Dr. Danica agreed. Yossarian saw it clearly in all its spinning reasonableness. There was an elliptical precision about its perfect pairs of parts that was graceful and shocking, like good modern art, and at times Yossarian wasn't quite sure that he saw it all, just the way he was never quite sure about the good modern art or about the flies Orr saw in Appleby's eyes. He had Orr's word to take for the flies in Appleby's eyes. That's the other thing. What he does is he writes, he introduces something that he hasn't dealt with at all. And you think, what the heck is this about flies in Appleby's eyes? But this is what draws you into the story. It's really brilliant. But catch 22, you must admit, an incredible catch.